Many people have argued that Zaya may privately feel pressured by the path her life has taken. Some have claimed that she's been placed in the spotlight as a key part of the family's public image, and that the highly visible life she now leads wasn't entirely a choice she made on her own. According to those critics, the public attention surrounding her transition and modeling career was largely shaped by Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union, who introduced her to a very public platform from a young age.
Lucky to have Zaya as my bonus daughter. I did not birth her, but I've never felt more connected to anyone. And I've never felt more of a purpose as one of the adults in her village that is standing 10 toes down, sometimes behind her, sometimes beside her, and sometimes in front of her leading. But no, I'm honored to love her.
Insiders are now allegedly confirming what many people have suspected for a long time, that this household isn't simply a warm, tight-knit family, but rather a carefully engineered Hollywood PR operation running at full speed. And according to those same sources, Zaya has reportedly reached a breaking point. Here's where things get interesting. When Zaya first came out to Dwayne and Gabrielle at the age of 12, Gabrielle publicly admitted that she didn't know how to respond. She even opened up about reaching out to cast members from the show Pose, contacting psychologists, and tapping into every resource she could find, all in an effort to educate herself on how to properly support her child through that moment. But here's the question worth asking. What if everything the Wade family has done publicly around Zaya, every speech, every activist stance, every carefully timed project, was less about genuine support and more about strategic image management? Because the volume of public appearances, declarations, and campaigns centered around their support for the LGBTQ+ community has been impossible to ignore. And that's exactly what sources are now allegedly pointing to. The pattern, they say, isn't accidental, it's coordinated.
Black trans people are being targeted, terrorized, and hunted in this country. Every day, everywhere. And there's rarely a whisper about it. We honestly don't approach this work as activists or leaders as much as we do this as parents. Parents who love our children and will do whatever the hell we can to keep them seen and secure and safe.
The broader claim being made is that by positioning themselves as the ultimate example of a modern, progressive family, Dwayne and Gabrielle have essentially built a protective shield around their public image, and that they've been financially benefiting from it in the process. And according to what's being said, Zaya herself may be quietly signaling that she's had enough. People who have gone back through her old interview clips and social media posts claim that beneath the polished, high-fashion exterior, there are signs of someone carrying a much heavier burden than what's being shown publicly. The allegation circulating is that Zaya is feeling the overwhelming pressure of being the centerpiece of her family's progressive brand, and that privately she is worn down by having her identity and personal journey repeatedly packaged into corporate deals and curated public narratives. And honestly, that framing becomes harder to dismiss when you factor in what Zaya's biological mother already put on record. She filed a legal petition claiming that Dwayne and Gabrielle were pressuring Zaya to move forward with a name and gender change in order to capitalize on business opportunities that had already been presented. She argued that if their intentions were truly genuine, they would have waited until Zaya turned 18 to make any legal decisions of that magnitude on her own terms. This wasn't just an allegation spoken in passing, it was documented in the actual petition filing. The language used stated that significant money had already been made in connection with the child's name and gender transition, and that additional income was anticipated. It further alleged that Dwayne had expressed his intention to make their child highly recognizable specifically because of the name and gender issue, and that endorsement deals and contracts were already being discussed in relation to it. Zaya's biological mother also pointed out that given Dwayne's standing as a high-profile professional athlete, the children's lives had already been heavily exposed to public scrutiny, and that he had appeared on national television and in major media outlets specifically to discuss Zaya's transition. Her stated concern was straightforward. She feared Zaya was being commercialized at a young age, and she was deeply worried about the uncontrollable consequences that come with that level of media exposure.
Real mom who wants her children to have a fair chance at making their own decisions, while you and your I want to be a husband convince your child that they need to get the whole trans thing going on now so they can get a Disney contract. And we all know what Disney does to children. Imagine what they do to trans kids.
To be absolutely clear about what was happening here, Zaya's biological mother was essentially pleading for patience, arguing that Zaya was too young to fully grasp the long-term weight of that decision, and requesting that they at least wait until she was old enough to make that choice with full understanding. That was the core of her position. So how did Dwayne and Gabrielle respond? They dismissed it entirely. Dwayne took to Instagram and publicly pushed back, framing the mother's concerns not as a legitimate parental perspective, but a coordinated attempt to damage his reputation. In his own words, he stated that while none of them were surprised by Siobhan's attempt to fight her child's identity, he was deeply disappointed that she continuously found ways to center herself and her own needs without any regard for her children. He went further, accusing her of choosing to be an absent parent entirely on her own, and made clear that this time he would not stay silent while she made a mockery of his commitment to his family. He closed with the pointed line that the high road had simply run out of space. And that response did not sit well with a lot of people. The general reaction was that, regardless of Siobhan's history as a parent, her core request had been reasonable. She wasn't fighting Zaya's identity, she was asking them to wait. Many felt that Dwayne's public response was excessive given the circumstances. And on Gabrielle's end, observers pointed out that if she truly respected Siobhan as Zaya's biological mother, she would have at least acknowledged the request to let Zaya reach adulthood before making permanent legal changes. Instead, Gabrielle was openly and publicly championing the transition, while Siobhan's concerns were being brushed aside entirely. Here's what makes Siobhan's position difficult to simply write off in hindsight. Since Zaya's transition, she has gone on to land a string of major commercial deals, including high-profile campaigns and runway appearances for Miu Miu, Tiffany & Co., and Prada, along with a Disney partnership that, by all accounts, generated significant revenue for the family. So the question that keeps coming up is whether any of that changes how we view the urgency with which the transition was pushed forward publicly. That judgment is yours to make. There's also a separate theory that has circulated over the years, that part of Dwayne's openness to Zaya's transition stems from a desire to experience through her something he never could himself. What is known is that Zaya initially identified as gay, before later coming out as transgender.
Early on, she was the one who sat down with us as a family and said, hey, I don't think I'm gay. I identify myself as a young lady, but she's known that for 9 years.
She's known since she was 3.
She's known since she was 3 years old. This is her life. This is no game to us. We're about protecting her heart. We're about protecting her joy. To do that, we have to support them. We see the smile on our daughter's face. We see the confidence that she's able to walk around and be herself.
And this is where things get genuinely hard to process. We're talking about an age where a child is still figuring out which shoe goes on which foot, still finding walls more interesting than coloring books, and still completely convinced that the moon is personally following their car home at night. At 3 years old, the human brain is operating almost entirely on imagination, instinct, and the kind of logic that only makes sense inside a Saturday morning cartoon. That is just the science of early childhood development. So when Dwayne goes on national television and tells the world that his 3-year-old had already arrived at a fully formed, deeply personal understanding of gender identity, a lot of people found that claim genuinely difficult to accept at face value. And that skepticism is a big part of why so many people are now convinced that the idea wasn't something Zaya arrived at independently, but rather something that was shaped and reinforced by the environment around her, specifically by Dwayne and Gabrielle themselves. There's also a separate thread to this conversation that has followed Dwayne for years. A number of people believe that his enthusiasm for Zaya's transition is connected to something more personal, that on some level, he has been working through his own unresolved feelings by projecting them onto her journey. That theory isn't new. There have been long-standing allegations regarding his private life, and some feel that Dwayne has inadvertently added fuel to that speculation himself. During a 2021 interview on the I Am Athlete podcast, he openly recalled that, as a child, he used to wear his sister's heels and clothing, a detail that, in the context of everything else being discussed, many people found worth noting.
Heels, I used to do all those things. I try to put on whatever my sisters wear, when all my sisters did, I try to do those things. So at first I said to myself, oh no, I did that. So I ain't just doing the things that I did. And then it kept going further and further, and then me and my wife had to look at each other and say, well.
And that wasn't the only moment that kept those conversations alive. There were a handful of other things that people pointed to over time, including a photo Dwayne posted with Gabrielle where he was seated with his legs crossed, visibly showing off a thigh tattoo, and a separate post where he displayed painted toenails and a gold anklet. On their own, those details might mean very little, but in the context of everything else swirling around him, people took notice. There was also a blind item that circulated widely, describing a former A-list NBA player who allegedly had a sexual relationship with an A-plus list teammate during road trips, with both men now retired and married to women. The names that kept coming up in connection with that blind item were Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. Beyond the blind items, there have been public figures who have made more direct statements. Blueface, the rapper, shared a post on social media targeting Gabrielle Union, in which he wrote that the whole world knows he loves women, while also claiming that the world knows her husband has different preferences. He added that he had previously refused to speak on them publicly, but felt pushed to respond. The language he used was crude and included several offensive remarks that aren't worth repeating in full.
As much, I guess, now because they're getting older, I guess it just moved over to the Wade house.
Energy transfers.
And I'm not saying that because of their trans daughter. I'm saying that because of the artist that I just spoke to not that long ago that got invited to a party at their house. Everything was cool up front till they went to the back and there was a bunch of old and young boys back there all naked in the Wade house. So I find it funny that Gabrielle's sitting there talking